there is a strange contradiction at the heart of modern life. We crave freedom, yet we grip everything so tightly. We say we want peace, yet we cling to the chaos we've known. We whisper about letting go, but deep down, most of us are terrified of what that really means. Because letting go isn't gentle. It's not a poetic Instagram quote or a fleeting moment of clarity. Letting go is an unraveling. It's a confrontation. It is, in its deepest essence, a sacred act of courage. We live in a world that teaches us to hold on, to relationships that hurt, to identities that shrink us, to dreams that no longer belong to us. We are taught that endurance is virtue, that longevity means success, that quitting is failure. So we hold on, longer than we should, harder than we need to. We tell ourselves we're loyal, we tell ourselves we're strong, we call it love. But often, it's fear in disguise. There's a weight to holding on, a slow, quiet heaviness that seeps into the bones. At first, it's hard to notice. We just feel a little more tired, a little less inspired, a little more reactive. But over time, the grip begins to define us. We don't even realize how much of our energy goes toward maintaining the illusion that we're okay, that we've got it together, that we're not breaking, but we are. We break in small ways, the tension in our shoulders, the sighs we don't mean to release, the silence after we speak our truth and are met with disapproval. We break every time we betray ourselves to be accepted, every time we shrink to fit a mold we never chose, every time we convince ourselves that we can't let go because what if there's nothing on the other side? And yet, something in us always knows. We may deny it, we may drown it out with distraction, but it's there, a voice beneath the noise, a whisper in the stillness. It says, this isn't who you are. This isn't what you came here for. You're not here to survive someone else's story. You're here to write your own. Letting go isn't just about release. It's about trust. Trusting that your worth isn't tied to what you can hold together. Trusting that something better can grow in the space where pain once lived. Trusting that you don't need to prove your strength by carrying what was never yours to bear. It's also about grief, because to let go is to admit that something is over, a season, a belief, a version of yourself. And grief is not a failure, it is an honoring, a sacred goodbye, a threshold between the old and the new. Most of us don't struggle with change because we hate the new. We struggle because we don't know how to say goodbye to what we've outgrown. So we avoid it, we distract ourselves with busyness, we make ourselves indispensable to others, we stay in motion so we don't have to feel. But life, in its persistent wisdom, has a way of slowing us down. It forces our hands open, it brings us to our knees, it interrupts our plans, not to punish us, but to free us. And when we finally let go, we realize we were never actually in control. We were clinging to an illusion of stability, mistaking predictability for peace. Letting go isn't giving up, it's waking up. Waking up to your own power, waking up to your truth, waking up to the life that was always waiting for you, just on the other side of your resistance. This is where the journey begins, not with control, but with surrender. Not with certainty, but with presence. Not with a grand plan, but with a quiet decision. I am willing to release what no longer serves me. I am ready to meet myself again. Control is seductive. It makes us feel safe, predictable, in charge. It gives us the illusion that if we just try hard enough, plan well enough, prove ourselves thoroughly enough, life will cooperate. The pain will stay away. The people we love will not leave. The ground beneath our feet will remain solid. But life is not a contract. It does not owe us consistency for our effort. It does not reward perfection with protection. Life is fluid, alive, unpredictable. And the more we try to force it into submission, the more we suffer. Not because life is cruel, but because our resistance is unsustainable. Most of us learned to control as a survival strategy. We were praised for being responsible, for anticipating others' needs, for staying ahead of disaster. We learned that love was conditional, belonging fragile, and that chaos could be held at bay if we just held ourselves tightly enough. And so, we became masters of micromanagement, of our emotions, our environment, our image. But control has a cost. It calcifies us. It keeps us locked in small, rigid containers. It convinces us that safety lies in knowing, that we must map out every outcome before we take a single step, that the unknown is dangerous and uncertainty is weakness. Yet life, the real, deep, meaningful life, lives in the unknown. It lives in the spaces we haven't charted yet. It speaks in the silence after the plans fall apart. It waits in the trembling breath between what was and what will be. And to find it, to feel it, to actually live it, we have to let go. Surrender is not weakness. It is not giving up. It is not apathy or passivity or indifference. True surrender is an act of radical faith. It says, I do not need to control everything to trust myself in anything. I do not need to have guarantees to take the next step. I do not need to predict the future to show up for the present. This kind of surrender doesn't roar. It doesn't shout its arrival or ask for recognition. It is quiet, still. It happens in the soft moments, when we unclench our jaw, exhale our expectations, and finally release the exhausting need to figure it all out. It happens when we admit that we are tired of being the one who always holds it together. When we admit that maybe we've never been in control after all, and maybe that's not a tragedy, but a kind of freedom. Letting go of control means we stop performing invincibility. We stop pretending we have all the answers. We start allowing the truth to be messy, uncertain, evolving. We begin to trust not in our ability to predict, but in our capacity to respond. Not in our armor, but in our resilience. Not in the perfect plan, but in the honest presence we bring to each unfolding moment. It's terrifying at first. Like standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure whether there will be ground or air beneath your feet. But slowly, something shifts. You stop bracing for impact and start listening for guidance. You stop fighting the current and start floating with the river. You begin to realize that there's a strength that comes not from gripping tighter, but from opening wider. And from that openness, a new kind of power arises. The kind that doesn't need to dominate or predict. The kind that moves with life, not against it. The kind that says yes to mystery, to change, to the soft wisdom of surrender. It's a power that doesn't cling, it collaborates. It doesn't panic, it perceives. This is what letting go makes possible. Not chaos, but coherence. Not abandonment, but alignment. Not failure, but flow. And once you've tasted this kind of presence, the brittle illusion of control no longer satisfies. You no longer want to hold life in your fist. You want to hold it in your heart. Letting go sounds beautiful in theory, but in practice, it often feels like grief, like loss, like failure. Because what we hold on to, even when it's hurting us, has become familiar. The job that drains your soul but pays the bills. The relationship that dims your light but quiets your loneliness. The identity that no longer fits but still earns you applause. We cling not because we're weak, but because we were taught to equate holding on with loyalty, with success, with love. We were praised for endurance, for staying, for being the one who doesn't give up. And somewhere along the way, we confused suffering with strength. But true strength is not measured by how long you can endure what breaks you. It's measured by how honestly you can name what no longer serves you. How bravely you can bless what once gave you purpose and walk away anyway. How clearly you can hear the voice inside that says, "This is not who I am anymore." It's not easy. There is a unique ache that comes with letting go of something before you have something else to reach for. A free fall of identity. A silence where the applause used to be. A stretch of days where you feel untethered, raw, exposed. This is the in-between, the liminal space, the wilderness between stories. And yet, in that wilderness, something holy begins to grow. A clarity that only comes when you stop numbing, stop running, stop clinging. You begin to feel your own heartbeat again, not the frantic rhythm of survival, but the grounded pulse of truth. You remember what it's like to listen to your body, your intuition, your breath. You remember what it's like to choose for yourself, not out of obligation or fear, but out of alignment. Letting go often reveals how much we've outsourced our worth to what we've built, who we've loved, how we've been seen. And when we release those things, it can feel like releasing parts of ourselves. But here's the quiet truth. If something can't stay when you stop performing, it was never truly yours. If something only loves you as long as you contort yourself, it never loved the real you. Releasing is not rejection. It is recognition. It's recognizing that the season has changed and your inner landscape must change with it. It's honoring that what once fit beautifully may now feel tight and brittle. It's remembering that a snake sheds its skin not because it hated the old one, but because growth made it necessary. Still, our minds resist. They want to hold on to what's known. They whisper, "But what if nothing better comes?" They panic at the possibility of emptiness. But that fear is not truth. It's the echo of a past where safety meant sameness, and you are not that version of yourself anymore. Letting go is an act of liberation, but also of devotion. Devotion to the part of you that no longer wants to shrink to fit. Devotion to the self you've buried under expectations, obligations, and old blueprints. Devotion to the life that feels like home, even if no one else understands the map. You are not betraying the past by releasing it. You are honoring it by allowing it to rest. By refusing to carry its weight into a future it was never meant to hold. You are saying, "I respect what was, but I will not let it define what will be." And in that act of soft defiance, something opens, a door that was always there but hidden behind your grip, and through that door, something new waits. Not a perfect life, not a pain-free one, but a life aligned with your becoming. So if you're here, in the ache of release, know this: you are not alone, you are not broken, you are birthing something truer. And yes, it is tender, but it is also holy. We live in a world that worships control. We are taught to strategize, to plan, to anticipate every outcome, to hold life in our hands as if we can sculpt it perfectly. Control becomes a comfort, a coping mechanism, a way to feel safe in an unpredictable world. But beneath the surface of this obsession lies an ancient truth. Control is an illusion, and surrender is our real strength. Letting go is not about becoming passive, it is about becoming honest. Honest enough to admit that no amount of planning can shield us from heartbreak, that no amount of calculation can guarantee belonging, that life, in all its beauty and brutality, moves in ways we cannot predict. And our real task is not to command life, but to meet it. Surrender is not weakness. It is the courageous act of loosening your grip on how things should be, so you can make room for how they actually are. It's the spiritual maturity to stop fighting what's leaving. It's the quiet wisdom of bowing your head to change, not as a victim, but as a witness to your own becoming. Control says, "I'll only be okay if everything goes my way." Surrender says, "I'll be okay even if it doesn't." That is the soft power of letting go, not the power that dominates or dictates, but the power that flows, adapts, and remains rooted even when everything else shifts. And in that surrender, you begin to see differently. You realize how much energy you've spent trying to hold people to expectations they never agreed to. How much of your time has been spent rehearsing conversations that never happened? How many dreams were rooted in proving something instead of honoring something? Control exhausts us because it asks us to carry what was never ours to hold. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what isn't yours. You stop trying to save people who haven't chosen to save themselves. You stop trying to edit your truth to keep others comfortable. You stop trying to fit a future through a doorway that was only meant for your past. And yes, you will grieve. You will grieve the fantasy of what could have been, the imagined life you held so tightly, the version of yourself you thought you had to be. But grief is not the end. It is the sacred space between chapters. It is where the seeds of real trust are planted. To surrender is to trust life enough to show up without the script. To let go of the need to know what's next. To rest in the radical belief that your worth is not in what you can control, but in who you are when you stop trying to prove anything. And as you surrender, life begins to respond. Not with immediate clarity or easy answers, but with resonance. The right people come, not because you chased them, but because you stopped pretending. The right opportunities emerge, not because you forced them, but because you made space for them. You realize that what is meant for you does not require grasping. It requires presence. This is the paradox of letting go. The less you try to control, the more you begin to feel anchored, not in outcomes, but in yourself. You begin to trust your own capacity to meet what comes. You begin to see that softness is not the opposite of strength, it is its expression. That surrender is not about giving up, it's about coming home. And so, little by little, you loosen the grip, not because you've lost faith, but because you've finally found it. Not in the certainty of the path, but in your own ability to walk it. Letting go isn't always about what you lose. Sometimes it's about what you risk, being misunderstood, And for many of us, that's a deeper fear than rejection, failure, or even grief. Because to be misunderstood means to be seen, but wrongly. It means to speak your truth and watch it land in someone else's story in a way you cannot control. We are conditioned to manage perception, to tailor our words, our tone, even our dreams to ensure acceptance. From childhood, we learn which versions of ourselves are palatable, which emotions get approval, which beliefs earn applause. And in that careful curation, we slowly trade authenticity for belonging. Not real belonging, but conditional, performative belonging, where our presence is welcome, but only if we silence our soul. Letting go of that performative belonging feels like standing naked in the wind, vulnerable, exposed. It is the decision to no longer clarify, defend, or explain parts of you that are sacred. It is choosing wholeness over image, integrity over impression. And that choice is not without cost. People will misunderstand you. They will reduce your depth to sound bites. They will see your boundaries as cruelty, your clarity as arrogance, your silence as anger. But none of that is your responsibility to fix. The soft power of letting go is knowing that your truth is not up for consensus. It's not a group project. It is enough that it is yours. Letting go of the need to be understood doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care more about living honestly than about being liked. It means you value self-respect more than public approval. It means you understand that clarity often looks like conflict to people who benefit from your confusion. And in that letting go, something beautiful begins to grow. Self-trust. The quiet knowing that you no longer need others to see you clearly to be whole. That your worth doesn't hinge on someone else's comprehension. That the right people will get it and the wrong ones never could, no matter how many times you try to explain. Self-trust is a sacred flame. It cannot be lit by external validation. It is kindled in the dark when you choose to believe yourself even when no one else does. When you choose to stand by your decisions even when they are unpopular. When you choose your peace over the endless exhaustion of convincing others to understand you. And with that trust comes a new kind of freedom, the freedom to speak, even if your voice shakes. To walk away, even if it leaves a silence. To be misunderstood and still stay rooted in your own knowing. Because the moment you stop trying to be seen clearly by everyone, you finally begin to see yourself. The paradox is this: the more you accept being misunderstood, the more clearly you begin to see. Your energy is no longer wasted on convincing others. Your focus returns to what is real, what is true, what is yours. You become less performative and more present, less concerned with your image and more devoted to your inner alignment. And perhaps the deepest truth is this: the ones who are meant for you will not require performance. They will not need you to shrink or to shine unnaturally. They will meet you in the middle of your contradictions and still stay. Because they too have learned the art of letting go, not of you, but of their need to mold you into something you're not. In this way, letting go becomes an invitation, a filter, a clearing. It removes the noise and reveals the truth. And in that truth, you are no longer alone, not because everyone understands you, but because you have stopped abandoning yourself. There's a strange comfort in familiar pain. We don't like to admit it, but we often cling to what hurts because at least it's known. The ache we've lived with becomes a part of us. It gives us identity, structure, and something to explain why we feel stuck. Letting go, then, isn't just about releasing a person, a dream, or a belief. It's about releasing the version of ourselves that was built around that pain. This is why healing can feel so destabilizing. When we begin to soften, to question, to step away from what once defined us, we enter a void. And the void is terrifying, not because it's empty, but because it's unfamiliar. It strips away the storylines we've rehearsed. It removes the excuses we've leaned on. It exposes who we are without the protective layers of suffering. Many people would rather stay in pain than face that kind of uncertainty. Because pain, at least the kind we've known for years, doesn't ask us to grow. It just asks us to endure. And we've been trained to endure, to tolerate, to survive without questioning the cost. Letting go interrupts all of that. It says, what if this pain isn't your home? What if you deserve more than just making it through? And the ego resists. It resists because it has become attached to the narrative that suffering equals depth. That struggle is proof of worthiness. that staying in something hard is nobler than walking away. But those are myths rooted in scarcity, in fear, in a deep belief that ease and peace must be earned through hardship. Letting go doesn't mean you failed. It means you finally listened. It means you no longer need chaos to feel alive. It means you're ready to write a new story, one that doesn't require you to bleed to be valid. Still, the loss is real, because even if the pain was unsustainable, it was still familiar. You might miss the routine of it. You might feel guilty for stepping away from what you once committed to. You might grieve the version of you who fought so hard to make it work. And all of that is okay. Grief is not a sign that you're going backward. It's a sign that you're letting go with consciousness, with reverence. The soft power of letting go is in how gently you allow the old parts of you to fall away. You don't need to rip them out or condemn them. You can thank them. You can honor them. You can say, "You helped me survive, but now I am ready to live." Living requires risk. It requires a willingness to be with discomfort, not the kind that depletes you, but the kind that invites you forward. The discomfort of unlearning, of softening into joy, of choosing presence over performance. And in time, the void isn't so scary. It becomes a space of possibility, a clean slate, a fertile ground. Not because someone fills it for you, but because you begin to plant seeds of your own. You begin to build a life that doesn't orbit around avoiding pain, but around cultivating peace. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't scream its arrival. It's subtle, quiet, sometimes so still that you question whether it's real. But as you let go of the drama, the cycles, the familiar ache, you begin to recognize peace not as boring, but as sacred, as something you never knew you needed until the noise was gone. And when the silence comes, let it. Don't rush to fill it. Don't run from it. Sit with it like an old friend. Because in that silence, a new voice rises. One that isn't frantic or afraid or performing. One that speaks from the core of your being and says, "I'm still here. I've always been here, and now I'm ready to be heard." That voice is your beginning. The soft voice of freedom. Letting go doesn't always look like some grand moment. It doesn't always come with clarity, closure, or congratulations. Sometimes it looks like packing your things in silence. Sometimes it's the pause before responding to the same argument you've had 100 times, and choosing not to respond at all. Sometimes it's walking away, not in anger, but in peace. The world romanticizes rebellion as loud, forceful, dramatic, but the deepest rebellion is often quiet. It happens when you decide to no longer abandon yourself, when you choose your sanity over tradition, your inner peace over external validation, your truth over the comfort of being accepted by people who never really saw you. There's a moment, barely perceptible, when you realize you've outgrown the life you once fought to keep. It doesn't mean that life was bad. It means you're no longer willing to stay small to fit inside it. And in that realization, a subtle revolution begins. You stop fixing what was never yours to hold. You stop clinging to cycles you've already learned from. You stop convincing yourself that staying loyal to pain is the same as being strong. Letting go, then, is not passive, it's active surrender. It's the decision to release what no longer serves, not because you've given up, but because you finally understand your worth, because you realize you don't have to keep proving your value through suffering. This process is not linear. Some days you'll feel liberated, other days you'll second-guess everything. That's normal. It takes time to deprogram yourself from the idea that struggle is necessary for meaning, that self-betrayal is noble, that staying is always more honorable than leaving. But the soft power of letting go doesn't demand that you have no doubts. It simply asks you to listen deeper than your fear. To remember that peace isn't something you chase, it's something you allow. And you can't allow peace while holding on to what poisons it. You may lose people. You may lose versions of yourself. You may lose illusions you clung to for years. But what you gain is far more valuable. Space to feel yourself again, to trust yourself, to live without twisting into 1,000 shapes to be palatable, pleasing, or predictable. And yes, it will feel lonely at times. Not because you're alone, but because you're detoxing from the noise. The noise of external opinions, of roles that suffocated you, of narratives that never belonged to you. That loneliness is not a sign you're failing. It's a sign you're finally hearing your own voice again, unfiltered. There is great courage in walking away, not in bitterness, but in softness. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring differently. Because you stopped caring more about being understood than being whole. Because you began to see that staying in what breaks you is not loyalty, it's avoidance. And so you walk, not with vengeance, but with reverence. Not to prove anything, but to preserve something sacred. Your inner truth, your emotional clarity, your sense of self. This is the quiet revolution. It doesn't need banners, it doesn't need applause. It happens in the nervous system, in the heart, in the deep exhale of relief when you realize, I don't have to carry this anymore. You are not weak for choosing yourself. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not cruel for leaving a situation that asked you to disappear in order to belong. You are simply ready, ready to soften, ready to be seen, ready to be free. There comes a time in your journey when the old story no longer fits. The version of you who once thrived on approval, who danced around conflict, who dimmed her light to keep others comfortable, she begins to crack. Not because she was false, but because she was incomplete. And your soul, in its relentless wisdom, refuses to shrink any longer. This unraveling doesn't always announce itself with drama. Sometimes it arrives in the quiet moments, when you wake up and feel a subtle hollowness in the life you built. When the words you speak no longer match the person you're becoming. When your smile feels like a costume and your ambitions taste like someone else's hunger. Letting go, in these moments, is not a betrayal, it's a return to the voice beneath the noise, to the body beneath the armor, to the you who existed before performance became protection. But this return often requires loss. Not because loss is the goal, but because growth sheds. Just like trees must release their leaves to survive winter, you too must release what no longer nourishes you. The friendships built on your silence, the job that pays you to stay numb, the routines that keep you distracted from your truth. And here's the hard part. The people around you might not understand. They may miss the old version of you, the agreeable one, the predictable one, the one who didn't make them question themselves. You may be accused of changing, of being difficult, of not who you used to be. And they'll be right, you're not, because you're finally becoming who you really are. To let go is to allow this becoming. It is to stop explaining your evolution. It is to choose authenticity over approval, even when it costs you relationships, even when it means sitting in the discomfort of being misunderstood. This is where softness becomes power. Not the power that dominates, but the power that endures, the power that bends without breaking, the power that says, I can hold your disappointment, but I will not hold your expectation as my truth. You begin to see that your boundaries are not walls, they are doors. Doors through which only those who honor your truth may enter. Doors that protect your energy, not out of fear, but out of reverence. And with every boundary drawn, you reclaim a piece of yourself. The parts you once outsourced to others, the parts you apologized for, the parts you buried so deep you forgot they were yours. They rise now, not as anger, but as clarity. Not as rebellion, but as remembering. This is how the soft power of letting go changes your life. It teaches you to release with grace, to walk away without bitterness, to speak truth without cruelty, to choose peace without needing to prove a thing. And in this space, your life begins to feel like yours again. Not a performance, not a product of someone else's blueprint, but a living, breathing reflection of your inner world. Imperfect, in progress, but deeply, undeniably yours. This is not the easy path, but it is the path of integrity. And when you lie in bed at night, no longer haunted by the dissonance between who you are and how you live, you'll know it was worth it. You'll know the letting go wasn't the end, it was the beginning. At some point in our lives, we all begin performing. We learn that to be liked, we must be agreeable, that to be accepted, we must be impressive, that to be loved, we must become what others need. Slowly, piece by piece, we trade our authenticity for approval. Not because we are manipulative, but because we are human, because we long to belong, because we are taught that love is something to earn, not something to return home to. And so we begin to edit ourselves. We make ourselves small in rooms that don't know how to hold us. We silence our opinions in conversations that can't hold complexity. We pretend we're fine so others won't feel uncomfortable. We smile when we want to scream, We say yes when every cell in our body aches for no. But eventually, the performance wears thin. The costumes itch, the lines you memorized so well start to blur. The applause that once gave you life now feels hollow. And in the quiet after the curtain falls, a voice within you whispers, "I miss me." That whisper is your soul, begging you to come home. The courage to stop performing is not loud. It does not demand attention. It does not scream, "Look at me." It quietly says, "This is me." No more masks, no more rehearsals, no more apologizing for your existence. Just truth, just breath, just presence. And when you stop performing, you begin to disappoint the people who only loved the role. You begin to feel the friction of truth rubbing against expectation. You begin to lose the places you once fit because the shape of your soul is changing. And that is terrifying. But it is also liberating. To stop performing is to reclaim your energy. To let the same effort you once spent on being palatable now be used for being present, for being real, for being whole. It is to learn how to breathe in a body that no longer needs to contort for belonging. It's not about being rude, it's about being honest. It's not about being rebellious, it's about being rooted. It's not about being fearless, it's about being faithful to yourself, to your values, to your own quiet knowing. This is the soft power of letting go. Letting go of roles that no longer serve you, identities that were never yours, and obligations that demanded your silence. It's trusting that what is lost in performance is more than made up for in presence. You begin to realize that some rooms were only sacred because of your energy, that some relationships were only stable because of your suppression, that some versions of success were actually prisons in disguise, and you stop begging for entry into spaces that ask you to leave yourself at the door. You walk differently now, not faster, not louder, but freer, with less to prove, with more to protect, with the knowing that your worth was never in your performance, but in your being, in your breath, in the way you quietly refuse to abandon yourself anymore. There's a silent desperation that haunts modern life, the need to control everything. We plan every detail, we calculate every risk, we micromanage every interaction, not out of arrogance, but out of fear. Somewhere along the way, we confused control with safety, prediction with peace, and rigidity with strength. But control is a poor substitute for trust. It's a brittle armor that eventually cracks. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you become passive or indifferent. It means you stop gripping so tightly that you strangle your own spirit. It means you loosen the grip around your expectations, around outcomes, around how others perceive you. It means you stop forcing life to fit your idea of how it should be, and begin to honor it as it is. The truth is, most of us don't fear chaos, we fear vulnerability. We fear being unprepared, unguarded, seen. So we build fortresses of control around our hearts. We call it being responsible. We call it being smart. But underneath, it's fear. It's a child who was once powerless, now trying to never feel helpless again. But real power doesn't come from domination. It comes from surrender. Not the kind of surrender that gives up. It's the kind that opens up. The kind that says, I don't have to know everything to trust myself. I don't have to control everything to feel safe. I don't have to be perfect to be worthy. This shift doesn't happen all at once. It begins in the small moments, when you choose to breathe instead of react, when you choose to listen instead of defend, when you choose to soften instead of tighten. It's the gentle rebellion of choosing presence over panic, curiosity over certainty, and flow over force. And yes, letting go will often feel like free fall, like losing ground, like losing yourself. Because for so long, you've mistaken control for identity. You've made safety your compass instead of truth. And when you begin to release that grip, everything feels like it's unraveling. But maybe what's unraveling is not your life, but the illusion. What remains is not chaos, it's clarity. You begin to live with more grace, more compassion, more resilience, because now your strength is not based on how tightly you can hold, it's based on how deeply you can trust. You trust your boundaries, you trust your instincts, you trust the timing of your own becoming. You begin to understand that growth has its own rhythm, and forcing it only delays the unfolding. This is the quiet dignity of surrender, not collapsing into helplessness, but rising into faith. Faith in your capacity, faith in your process, faith that even when things don't go your way, they still go somewhere meaningful. And that meaning, while not always immediate, will always be yours to make. Letting go doesn't mean giving up on life. It means learning to allow life. Allowing is not passivity, it is a sacred kind of participation. When you stop resisting what is, you open yourself to what could be. You stop clenching your fists at reality, and instead learn to cradle it with open hands. It's a posture of humility, of deep listening, of courage without aggression. You begin to see that most of your pain wasn't from what happened, it was from your refusal to let it be what it was. You wanted it to be different. You wanted them to act differently. You wanted the outcome to match your vision. And so you suffered, not because life was cruel, but because you couldn't let go of the script you wrote in your head. There's a quiet kind of power in no longer needing to control everything, a power in trusting that not knowing is not failure. That mystery is not a threat. That uncertainty does not mean you're unsafe, it just means you're alive. This is the wisdom that dawns when you stop treating life like a puzzle and start treating it like a relationship. To allow is to trust the unfolding. It is to recognize that life, like nature, moves in seasons. Some things bloom, others decay. Some parts of you will shine brightly and others will fall apart. And that's not a problem to fix, but a rhythm to honor. Control seeks to avoid pain. Allowing makes space for meaning, for beauty, for grace. You may notice your nervous system beginning to relax, your breath slowing, your heart softening. Not because you have fewer problems, but because you're not gripping them so tightly. You've stopped demanding that life guarantee your safety. Instead, you've decided to cultivate your own sense of safety within. And it's from this internal safety that the most honest parts of you emerge. The inner child no longer has to scream to be heard. The hidden artist no longer has to beg for space. The quiet voice inside, the one drowned out by noise, by worry, by striving, finally has a seat at the table. You've stopped treating yourself like a project to be managed and started honoring yourself as a presence to be witnessed. Allowing isn't lazy, it's devotional. It means you stop fixing and start feeling. You stop strategizing and start sensing. You don't abandon effort, you just let effort be led by intuition, by alignment, by flow. And in doing so, you find that life begins to meet you, not always in the ways you expected, but often in the ways you most needed. You begin to believe, not in fate, not in formulas, but in relationship. A reciprocal dance between you and the world. You show up, and life responds. Not always immediately, not always gently, but always meaningfully. Allowing is how you enter that dance with grace, with openness, with the quiet power of someone who no longer needs to force what is meant to find them. Letting go allows you to reclaim the most essential rhythm of all, your own. The one that existed before the noise, before the pressure, before the world told you who to be. That quiet, subtle tempo of your truth. When you stop clinging to identities that no longer serve you, you begin to hear the deeper music beneath the noise. It's not loud, it doesn't compete, but it's there. It always was. This is the rhythm of authenticity. It pulses through you when you say no to what isn't aligned, even when it disappoints others. It speaks through you when you follow the strange tug towards something you can't explain, even when logic tells you not to. It reminds you that your life is not a performance to perfect, it's a presence to embody. Letting go doesn't erase your past, but it frees you from reliving it. You begin to walk lighter, not because nothing hurts anymore, but because you're no longer dragging your entire history behind you. You're not rehearsing the old stories of betrayal, rejection, or failure. You carry them, yes, but as wisdom, not as wounds. The rhythm of your soul doesn't demand speed. It doesn't rush. It doesn't compare. It invites slowness, intimacy, depth. It teaches you to breathe through the discomfort of not knowing. It shows you how to stay present in the middle of uncertainty, to hold space for the questions without demanding immediate answers. This rhythm is not glamorous, but it is profoundly alive. You begin to live from the inside out. You start measuring your life not by milestones, but by moments of resonance. Not by approval, but by alignment. You start noticing when you're forcing something, and you stop. Not because you've failed, but because you're listening now, and that listening is sacred. Reclaiming your rhythm means trusting your own timing. It means letting go of the pressure to be somewhere else by now, to have achieved more, to know more. to be healed already. It means allowing yourself to be in process, without shame, without apology, without rushing to fix what was never broken. This is a quieter, more sustainable way of living. One where you don't burn yourself out to prove your worth. One where you don't perform your pain or your progress. One where you can rest without guilt, speak without fear, and change your mind without collapse. It's the rhythm of a soul no longer at war with itself. And perhaps the greatest gift of letting go is this. You begin to feel safe with your own becoming. You stop waiting for someone else to validate your path. You stop fearing the unknown. You know that whatever rises, you can meet it, not because you're certain, but because you're anchored in something real. You, your rhythm, your truth. Letting go isn't the end, it's the quiet beginning of something truer. It's choosing to live with intention, even after pain. To forgive yourself for what you didn't know, for who you had to be to survive, and for the times you lost yourself trying to be loved. This time, you move differently. You speak honestly. You listen inward. You stop shrinking to fit spaces that were never meant for you. You allow tenderness and truth to coexist. Your boundaries protect your peace, not your fear. Your silence becomes a sanctuary, not a hiding place. The power of letting go lies in who you become after. Someone softer, stronger, someone who can hold loss and hope in the same breath. Someone who understands that healing isn't erasing the past, it's choosing a future rooted in truth. There is no final destination, just this breath, this moment, this choice. And from here, you begin again. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're done living in fear. You're ready to embody peace, not chase it. To live from enoughness, not scarcity. You no longer wait to be chosen, you choose yourself. And that is the soft revolution, a life reclaimed, one honest moment at a time.